So everybody having fun so far? All right. Now, I get it's Friday afternoon, it's June. You want to be somewhere drinking Negroni, which is what I'm dying for right now. But really what's been exciting is the level of enthusiasm today, the fact that people are interested in staying and paying attention. And Justin, it's going to make our report very exciting and really something to look forward to. As I mentioned early this morning, we are going to come out with a report at the end of this process. And Justin Pascone, who's Director of Policy, but acting as photographer also today. Council, we're saving money. We didn't want to hire a photographer. We'll be reaching out to the people here today to get feedback, so thank you. We wanted to end the day with something that I think affects us every day, and that's Google, who doesn't use the adjective or the verb or the, I feel like it's everything now, adjective, verb, noun, Google, 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 but it's a part of our life, and I think a great part of our life. And what's been fascinating about Google from our perspective and watching the real estate and the development and the construction and the jobs and everything is it's been happening right around us, and maybe we don't even know it's happening. And that's kind of like Google is happening right around us, and we don't even know it's happening. And I find it amazing to hear what they're planning and what they're doing and the vision and what already has been accomplished by Google. So to talk a little bit to us today is, and there's going to be two people, but I'm going to introduce William Floyd, who's an old friend, Director of Public Policy and Public Affairs for Google. He's really managing all of the outward-facing relationships in the state, the city, government and regulatory interactions, public affairs, community relations. I worked closely with William when I was at the Brooklyn Chamber of Commerce, and we did a great program together there. But little known fact about William Floyd, he worked for the New York Building Congress many, many moons ago. And I'm going to say something that you said earlier.
Not that many.
Not that many. It was a little old. Anyway, but William Floyd said to me earlier in the green room how impressed, and you don't mind that I say this.
No, not at all.
How impressed he is that the Building Congress is tackling and putting on something like this. And I think the Building Congress, through its leadership, and there's many board members here, has really come such a long way in embracing all of this. And it's really a testament to all of our members, the fact that we put on, for the first time in our 98 history, a full-day conference, totally outside of our comfort zone, and did something that I think 2-3 years ago, people would have said you're crazy for wanting to do that. So I really want to say thank you to all of you for really helping us put this together. And without further ado, William Floyd from Google.
Thank you, my friend. Thank you, Carlo, for that kind introduction. And yes, it is true, many, many moons ago, more years than I care to count, I had the great pleasure of working at the New York Building Congress as their head of public policy and public affairs, in part to help the organization try to look to the future at a time when construction was down and there was not a lot of activity going on. They thought that a position like mine was integral to help point the organization and the construction industry to look toward the future. So it's kind of appropriate that I can come home again and be a part of this conference, which again is looking at the future and how technology can be used by the construction industry to better respond to a changing work environment. At Google, we know a little bit about something like that because we are trying to approach our own work environments in a way that is infused with innovation, that's forward-thinking, or as my colleague who I'm about to introduce, Michelle Kaufmann, we were just saying how it's near future. And sometimes it's far future looking as well. But as a part of my job, as the head of state and local for the company, I deal with most of our real estate projects around the world. And I thought, maybe this might be a good forum to talk about it. But then I realized, watching all of the great talks, particularly Vishan's, talking about how we can think differently, I thought, maybe I'll scrap the boring real estate discussion. You guys know all about that. And maybe focus more on the innovation piece, which Michelle is going to talk to you about in a second. So let me just tell you a little bit about Michelle Kaufmann. She is our architect in residence at Google, and she heads our research and design division at Google. She's worked on a lot of projects, but her big focus is figuring out how do we build innovation into our built environment in little ways and in big ways. So hopefully, I think you'll really be impressed by her presentation. It's pretty fun. So without further ado, I'm going to give you over to Michelle.
Great. Thank you. Thanks for having me. Google, as many of you may know, of our offices, which are now in over 150 cities in 60 countries for the past 20 years, we have been focused on making a great workplace with the belief that if we make amazing work environments where our Googlers can thrive, then we as a business will also thrive. If our Googlers are happy, if they're healthy, the business will thrive. To date, it has been, with early trends that we've had, really focusing on a frictionless workplace in both areas of focus, as well as collaboration, socialization, learning, lifelong learning, creating spaces for casual collisions where we want to help empower Googlers to run into people maybe that they don't know, but maybe working on something that could help them be great collaborators. Sustainability has been a big focus of the work to date in terms of energy, healthy air quality, healthy materials, water, and really a big focus on happiness and health. To date, all of our work has been in tenant improvements. We're like the biggest hermit crab that I know of, but now we're starting to do ground up buildings. Most of them so far have been in California, and you may have seen or heard of some of them just south of San Francisco. So as we look to making ground up buildings, as well as districts, and taking what has been really a suburban landscape of an office park, but we've been growing so much, so in the South Bay, growing in the South Bay, but trying to make them now really vibrant, dense, I'm just gonna move my water bottle over here, dense, vibrant places, which is a really interesting challenge of how we can do that. Like, how can we actually make places where people want to be in a place that is not a city, where people can be happy and healthy, our buildings can be adaptable and resilient, where spaces can be connected and fluid, spaces that are truly, and buildings in places that are authentic and diverse, which is hard when you start with, it's much easier in places like New York, where there are things to really capture and grow from to be authentic. How do we do that in some of these areas where there is currently not much to capture? And make buildings and spaces that are efficient and beautiful with innovation and experimental aspects. Because really we want to achieve things that are pretty bold. How do we make it such that people can get from one part of campus to another in 2 minutes when we don't want them driving in cars, because that's just not a very fast or efficient or happy way to do that? How can we have radical 24/7 utilization of spaces that could add more vibrancy and allow us to actually have community and tenant spaces where it's the young up-and-comer type of companies? How can we have super connected teams that typically want larger floor plates, but have you also have a sense of intimacy with your smaller team? And how do we make sustainability scalable? Because we don't want to do something that only us as a company can afford. We want to actually invest in helping technologies that are good for all buildings, make it scalable and cost effective so everyone can do it. So this is a helpful image for me because our Google leadership vision is pretty far out there. I mean, you can imagine like Larry Page, Sergey Brin, Sundar, they're currently spending most of their days thinking about Mars, thinking about how we can have internet access to everybody on the planet. And so they look at how we currently make buildings and they're like, this is ridiculous. It's so wasteful. It takes so much time. Shouldn't everyone be able to afford to live in a healthy home? Shouldn't it only cost $20,000 rather than $2 million to live in an area in San Francisco? Surprisingly, it is $2 million. And so if that's their vision out there, and what's on the market today is down in the lower left-hand corner, how do we get even close to being up there, knowing that we have to be delivering buildings today? So a lot of the work that I've been doing most recently is heading up our R&D lab to try to stretch things before projects even start, to help bring some of the innovation that we can only do if we do it before the project starts. And I think many of us know this kind of graph where at the beginning of the project is where we actually have the ability to have a large opportunity for influence with low cost changes. So that's really where our R&D work is focused before projects start. Because if we wait until like the traditional mock-up time, which if we're lucky is in construction documents, usually it's during construction, that is really not the time to be making any changes, to be learning from prototyping. So a lot of our work then is focused in the beginning. How do we look at systems across our portfolio that's ahead? Looking not just at one project, but how do we look at the next 10, the next 20 projects and find systems efficiencies and materiality, innovations for us to apply to all of those buildings before we even start? Because we know that efficiency and productivity is really an area where it's hard for us, just knowing the current industry as it stands, for us to be able to just rely on how it is today. And can we help try to look at strategies? And these are the three kind of main strategies that we're looking at with the R&D work, is mixing kit-of-part product platform with technology, automation, and offsite fabrication. And our area in the South Bay, which is not unlike New York, the cost of living is so high, so the cost of place makes it very difficult for us to keep cost control, as well as the lower level of skilled labor, which is reducing by every year. So the offsite fabrication allows us then to capture that labor force, allow them to live in areas where they can afford to live and have happy and healthy lives themselves, bring in systems, utilize technology and automation within that prefabrication that's in an area where people can afford to live, and then in areas of our work, create a kit of parts and a product platform for things that are more of the hidden aspects of the building, so that way we have more money and time to actually push on the innovation elements. So it's really looking more at how we approach design and production of our hardware systems and how our software engineers think about productization, and how could we take that similar level of thinking and approach it with the building industry. And then as we look at tomorrow, it's even bigger challenge that we have. Physical and digital worlds we know are going to emerge. VR, AR, mixed reality, these are things that are definitely going to be changing the workplace beyond what we can even imagine today. Artificial intelligence and machine learning, robotics, autonomous mobility, as well as even aspects of Google's business is expanding beyond search to working on moonshots. So even what we consider workplace 5 years ago is very different than even today. So as we look to try to make buildings that we want to last and be vibrant for the next 100 years, how do we think about a future workplace that we don't even know what it will be in 10 years? We just know it'll be really different than today. So how do we think about our buildings today that we're building for true adaptability for tomorrow, so that way it could become many other things? Could an office building become living environment? So I'm going to use a few projects just to show you some examples of how we've been thinking about this. So this first project, which is our first ground up building, which is called Charleston East. It's based on the address. That's where the name comes from. We worked with Bjarke Ingels and Thomas Heatherwick on this project. It's around 600,000 square feet, LEED Platinum. We're also working with the Living Building Challenge folks because it's a really holistic way of looking at sustainability, and it's pretty robust. So this building was designed, it's actually just 2 stories. The idea here is that we know our teams are growing. So could we have teams like an Android team? Could we have people that are a team of 2,500 people, 2,700 people, all feel like they're working together and visually connected while still feeling like they have the intimacy for their smaller team? So with these 2 stories, on the ground level, we have the amenities where we have the cafes, meeting rooms, and then on the upper level, we have where the team spaces are. Then the whole building is covered with this canopy that then allows long span, highly adaptable interiors. And that's a big part of this project, is to make it super adaptable for the future. On the roof, it's covered with PV panels that will produce 40% of the energy of the building, as well as having clear story windows, so every desk has views out without glare, and having the sun shading system for heat reduction. So we wanted to fill the roof with PV panels, but we also wanted it to be beautiful, and not that solar panels aren't beautiful, but sometimes they're just not. And so we like scoured around to try to find, is there such a thing as a beautiful PV panel? And we found some, and I'm sure you guys know of them, but they're not that great in terms of efficiency yet. And we wanted to do something that wasn't just beautiful, like it had to actually have a meaningful ROI, or otherwise it would just be silly, it would be vanity. So we did find this small company, it was like 4 guys in a garage, but they had this technology that was really interesting. So we were prototyping it in the R&D lab, and we kept testing it, and we're like, yeah, you know what? It actually works. It's beautiful, and it seems to actually be producing energy in an efficient way. But there was no way that we were gonna have 4 guys in a garage deliver our whole roof system. So, and it was gonna be a long time before they could actually bring it to market. As I'm sure you know, like smaller companies can have a tough time sometimes. So what we did then is we have the power of our buying power. So we said, what if we buy 1 million square feet of these panels? Could that help bring it to market? And so what that did is then it allowed another company to say, oh, okay, great, we'll buy that technology from the 4 guys in the garage and then deliver it for this building and another building that we have called Bayview. And so what's super cool is we've been working with them then, and they'll be installed for these buildings. They'll be available to the market then after these buildings are built. We have no financial investment in them other than we used our buying dollars to now bring them to market, which is pretty cool. Water and waste is a big part of the work that we're doing in California. We have a serious drought, and so that becomes a big part of the work. In the Charleston East building, we're having a center section where we can just welcome the public and the community right into the building, which is a pretty new thing for a tech company, although it's not new for Google here in New York, where we have Chelsea Market, and we have growing presence of Grow with Google, et cetera, and it's becoming a part of our work as we move forward, that we really want to be connecting with community more in a real and authentic way. So this is a place where then people who maybe have new ideas on VR or have new technologies where they can come and show their work and people can test out their work, and have different pop-ups of new chefs or new retailers who want to come in and demonstrate their wares. We have 24 courtyards in this building, so that way every team on the second level has their own identity of their particular type of courtyard. And then this is showing the upper level where it has this terraced system within the courtyards breaking up the space. So that way people can feel connected to the overall 2,500 person team, but still have their smaller team of whether it be 8 people or 40 people, and they can adapt to their changing needs. So that's a big part of the work that we've been doing, because we know that our teams change so often. It's not like the traditional companies or older companies where you can have an enclosed office, like you kind of know, like it's not going to need to change that much, but because our products change
so often. Some of our product companies launch a new product every 3 days, which is crazy pants when you think about it, because then that they have to go through these super fast cycles of needing to set up a war room and be able to add people and move people on a very quick basis. Traditional building construction doesn't allow us to adapt that quickly because of typical drywall construction. You can't demo a wall fast enough without disrupting a team. So this idea is that we want to have what we're calling soft architecture, which are elements that can be added, taken away, moved over a weekend, so there's no team disruption, but they can adjust as quickly as they need to, as quickly as technology can change. And so it really allows this vibrant place where teams can make it their own, it can adjust over time, it can adjust quickly in the short term, and it can adjust in the long term. So you can imagine with that kind of building and that kind of landscape, the traditional methods of being able on the client side to make sure that it's a great experience really benefited greatly from VR. So I thought when we started this, we're working with these talented architects, we're all fairly smart folks, we can read floor plans, we can read sections, we can read renderings, it'll be simple, but then once we started actually utilizing VR and walking through, it totally changed the game. So then I started spending at least a day, a week, just in VR, all the time with the building, going through it to be able to look for things mostly that don't work. Because once you actually move through the space, it's a very different thing than just having the cropped, perfect rendering where you know, and I can say this because I did it too when I was an architect, you crop it, you kind of hide the crappy stuff off to the side, and you do the ideal lighting, and no one's gonna look at what's going on underneath that stair. But when you actually, from the client side, can walk through the VR and be able to see things, really experience it, imagine what it will be like for the people who will be living in this building, it helps us to improve it. Now we're able to actually collaborate within the VR system, and then we'll be able to have it help during construction as well. So we're pretty excited about that because a lot of the key aspects of the work that we're doing really is to optimize for the teams, for the people where they spend most of their time. So making sure every desk has a view out, making sure that every desk has the ability to have natural light, have ways to be able to focus, have connection to nature, to connect to the rest of the team. So we did a lot of analysis to ensure that we had proper daylighting at different times of the day, at different times of the year, and that's how we adjusted then our floor plates and where courtyards would go and how big the floor plates would be for each of the teams. Acoustics is another area where we did a lot of acoustic modeling because, as you can imagine, if you look at this, you would say, oh, that looks terrible. It's going to be so loud. So we're doing a number of things for acoustics. We're doing acoustic mapping, strategic soundscaping, doing acoustic absorbing in various areas of the soft architecture that we're developing, which is why we have a range of options that we're doing so that way we can really help with the acoustics. And we did a sound lab that we created in our R&D lab where we mixed that with virtual reality. So we're able to walk through and be able to test it and test it against our current spaces so people could see how different it may be. Because we know that that's such a key aspect to health and well-being is the acoustic comfort, that access to views in nature, thermal comfort, and healthy environment. So it's under construction now. This is a photo that we took last week. It's pretty exciting. And it's super fun, walking by the building, even though I knew the design, but it's really fun to see it now when you walk by. It's almost like, what is that? That can't be an office. Is that even a building? What is that? And it makes you smile. And it's super fun to watch people who are walking by the building and have them sort of stop and look at it. So we'll keep you posted. Hopefully you guys will come and visit. It should be open in 2021. I wanted to show you another project that is a new project that will be starting construction very soon. This is also in the South Bay. This is designed by Big Architects, Bjarke Ingels. It is 1 million square feet in these 2 buildings. And the idea here is working from first principles where we want to make a great building, but do it at traditional developer cost. So this is, again, this idea of doing something that's scalable, that other people should just be able to to do as well. So that makes our job really hard on the one hand, but also really meaningful. To be able to get up every day and look for solutions to be able to do that is pretty great. So in this case, we wanted to work with a lot of those same principles of having every desk be able to have views out, have access to nature without glare. So all of the desks face north, so we're looking at this green roofscape. So this is a 5-story building that steps up, ramps up, so you can bike to your desk. You could skateboard to your desk. Might be a little dangerous coming down, but we'll work through that. This is a section, so north is on the left-hand side, so all the desks face north. It will help with being able to collect the rainwater, and then on the south side is where we will have more of a student union aspect to the work. And then the workspace, again, high ceilings, so it can be highly adaptable for the future as we look to historical precedents to understand how we should be building for the future and looking for what buildings in the past have been highly adaptable. Typically, there's a couple of really key principles, which is high ceilings and certain bay sizes that have allowed buildings to take on 3 or 4 different lives over 100 years or 200 years. And this is a view from the 5th floor looking north. So you can see the bay, and so every desk feels like it's connected to nature. And then this is from the south side where you can see this idea of this front porch in the 5-story building, and that's where we'll have the various amenity spaces like the cafes and conference rooms, and looking more to a student union kind of design where we have these aspects be adjacent to one another so there can be vibrancy and adaptability on a day-to-day basis and multi-purpose with a lot of those spaces. Then another aspect that we're working on right now with the R&D team is looking at different materials to build. So mass timber is something we're super interested in, where through fast-growing wood being compressed together, we can create structures both for our office buildings as well as upcoming residential buildings that we'll be doing not for Google housing, but we just need a lot of housing in California in general, and it's a friction point for us as a business. So we're super excited to be able to do housing in general to allow people to have more affordable housing. So with the mass timber, it allows us to create buildings that only create 1/10 the carbon as the steel and concrete equivalent, which is pretty amazing. And then through automation and prefabrication, it can also save cost. It can save time and be more sustainable and be a much better, like beautiful, healthy building as an end result. So that's pretty exciting to be able to look at how these things can all happen in one thing and how sustainability can be something that is scalable, that everyone can do. So we've been spending time in the R&D lab in advance of a project so we can really do the studies at that time of what are the key learnings, what are the key strategies for engineering, for offsite prefabrication of systems. So we've been doing a lot of structural efficiency analysis and construction sequencing. And this is our first pilot project that we're starting, which is a 5-story workplace building. Again, high ceilings, highly adaptable, but made out of mass timber. And then hopefully if this goes well, we'll be doing a lot more mass timber projects. And this is something where it's been done quite a bit in Europe, in Australia, in Canada, not in the US so much. So it's also something where we're really hoping to be able to have the industry help and have a real supply chain and have people who will be able to design and build these buildings for us. And in general, that's the thing. Like, we definitely need to be working with a lot of the smart folks in this room to be able to create buildings and districts to allow for the ambitions that we have been wanting to do. Oops. So with that, I will end. And so please do reach out to us if you've got... Thanks. If you have good ideas, please let us know. We'd love to work with you. Thanks.
Well, thanks, Ms. Cheryl, and to all the Googlers, we appreciate everything you do. I wish we had something that for our firm so we could call ourselves something like that. That's cool. So I'm going to make this quick because I know it's a Friday afternoon, but there is some thank yous and there's an ask. So I'd like to just quickly do this. You know, this is really, Milo mentioned it earlier, this has been, I don't know, 5 or 6 years in the making. It was the Council on Innovation and Best Practice that we started when I was chairman. Actually, it wasn't even the council at that point, became a council after that. And how many people in the room have been to any of the Council on Innovation and Best Practice meetings? Okay, so I want to thank you all because it was really the inspiration for this day and what we want this day to become. Because what we saw was we did produce some good work product, but the best part of what those meetings were about were the conversations we had, where we really challenged each other about how our industry was struggling, how we weren't innovating, and why we had to do something about it. And so after having a lot of those conversations and walking out all the time and saying, we really have to broaden this audience because, you know, we're preaching to the choir, this is where it really started. And thanks to people like Carlo and Charlie Murphy and others, we started to think about what could we do to make more of a lasting way to have these conversations happen. And then the last thing that happened was Carlo came along. And Carlo not only embraced it, he stuck it into the blueprint that's gonna roll out for who we're gonna be as an organization. And we said, oh, you know what? We gotta get serious now because this is not just talk, even though the talk was great, we need some action. So it is great to be here today and to see this happen. But what I'm the ask for you all is, how do we make this bigger and better? And that's really going to be up to all of you. Last night we met with the young professionals, which is everybody who's under 60 to me. And I challenged the young professionals to say, this program needs to be yours next year. We'll go out and make the asks if you don't make the ask, but tell us what you need for it to be. We've talked about 2-day programs with workshops. We've talked about all kinds of stuff. But when we're talking about driving innovation and changing our industry, it shouldn't be a 60-year-old that's driving that conversation. So the ask I have for all of you, and for both of you, if you're in the younger generation here, or you're working with people in the younger generation, or you just feel young, I got a new hip, so I feel young right now, is to give us feedback. Sure, tell us what you liked about the day. Don't worry, it won't be on a Friday again, I promise you. That was just something we had to find a space. It was a space that's available that'll be, number one, it won't be on a Friday. But don't tell me what you didn't like. As I say to always in my office, tell me what you would do. How would you make it better? How can we make this to be, look back 5 years from now and say this is the go-to event that not only is the place where you go to learn about what's happening in our industry and how we're moving our industry forward, but look what it's done. Look at the impact of this event as we go forward. That's what we want the report to be whenever it comes out in a month or so, is to talk about actionable things that came out of these discussions. How can we support legislation so we can actually use drones in New York City, for example, in a positive way? All of the things you heard about today. So Carlo and others from the building department, who I'd like to give a round of applause to for running a great event. They will be reaching out to all of you and to get your feedback, please. Unfiltered, like I said, don't waste a lot of time on what you liked. Tell us what you do differently, how you would make this event even better, and how we can get to the point where we're going to fill this room next year and even bigger rooms in the years to come. So thanks again. Thanks for your time, and let's keep innovating. Thank you.